welcome to episode 332 of Stand Up. It is the Friday show, and usually on Fridays we've got Christian Finnegan, but he at the last second could not be here, and so I have replaced him with the second string, and that is Bill Boyle and Dan McDonald, two of the longest listeners of the show, smartest guys, two very close personal friends and confidants of mine joining me. Also, Goldie Taylor, a very special guest, joining me as well. Very excited for you to hear my conversation with Goldie. It was real good. But as a way of introduction, Dan McDonald sells drugs, develops and sells drugs and saves lives. And Bill Boyle sells parking spots, basically. I don't know how I could minimize either of you any more than that. I don't know how I could give you less credibility, but frankly, they're joining me now on Zoom. Dan, Bill, you really have become both very good friends of mine over the years. I trust you. I like you. I think you're super smart. I think you're both better men than me, and I mean that. And that's why I spend time with you, and that's why I'm glad to have you joining me here at the top of the show to go over some of the days and weeks' news. Bill, thank you for joining me again regularly and here tonight with our friend Dan McDonald. And you guys have a lot in common, so this should be fun.
Hey, Pete, thanks. It's great to be here.
That was smooth.
Indeed. Fake it till you make it. It's working.
Now, I know you guys would rather talk about beer with each other for a long time, and also that you both have Asian wives. I'm sure that's something that you really want to get to, but I don't care about either of them. And have I offended you?
No, but I hope my wife didn't hear that.
Yeah. I mean, I care about your wives, but I don't know. Is there a club where, like, white guys marry a non-white person and you kind of look at each other like, oh, hey, that's cool. What's that been like?
Actually, what you do if you're a guy who's married to an Asian woman and you meet another, like, pasty white guy like me who's married to an Asian woman, you wonder if he's the kind of dude who has, like, black kung fu pajamas, right? And if it turns out that he is that guy, like, you want to avoid him like the plague.
Why? What does that mean?
Right?
And Dan, do you even get what he's talking about?
Yeah, so the implication is that he's married to her because he's into all things Asian, and right, that he's doing it not
Yellow
because
fever.
of exactly.
Oh,
exactly.
His whole life is a cultural appropriation of Asian stuff,
Or even just like is bought into the idea that Asian women are like, name the stereotype, submissive or whatever. And by the way, the stereotype is crazy, but also couldn't be more wrong. And every single
one?
Like Irish guys drink too much a lot. But the idea that like Asian women are submissive is like absolutely insanely wrong. Bizarre.
I am the total simp in our relationship for sure.
Same. I'm kind of scared all the time, actually.
Yep.
Yeah. I live in fear.
All that's so weird because Bill is actually wearing a Vietnamese rice patty hat right now.
Got one, actually.
What is it called? I called it probably got an actual name. Hat. What else is there about that's interesting about that? I mean, how have you both felt about, because both of you also have kids, and how have you felt about the anti-Asian violence that you've seen obviously break out as a result of the horrible racism led by the last president? Dan?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's horrific, and it's still not covered as much as it should be, right? It's a very real thing. Even though we're in where we are in New York, we don't see it nearly as much, but some of the videos we've been seeing are in fact from New York, right? While we don't see it in our neighborhood, it's a very, very real thing. And you can see it. It's just like, all the other racist sentiments that have been sort of, boiled up to the surface, right? Perhaps given permission because of some of the rhetoric that the Trump presidency allowed. You see this stuff coming through too. And this is what happens when you start calling the coronavirus the Kung flu.
Bill?
Yeah. It's funny. We're not out of the house a whole lot. So luckily my wife hasn't run into it as far as I know. I hope we don't, because I got to tell you, I'm breaking a leg if somebody does that to my wife in front of me.
Yeah.
I mean, there's going to be bones broken, and I'm not kidding. I would not handle it well. I would react violently to it. But luckily we haven't dealt with it. But I got to tell you, we hear stories from people. I do. I'm not sure if my wife does, but I've heard some stories from friends, and it's fairly ubiquitous right now.
Do you think more about do you worry more about your wives being somehow attacked in public or something, or do you worry about more like I would think that it'd be more realistic to think that your kids are going to somehow suffer ridicule in school or something? Not that, I mean, they're not really going to school, right?
Where my kid is in. It's so diverse.
Yeah, so it's not.
And there's so much more attuned to the stuff than we ever could have imagined being, that I don't really worry about it. Plus, my kid kind of sits in this ethnic zone where he could be one or the other. You can't really tell. So I don't worry about him. And honestly, I don't really worry about my wife. My wife can handle herself. I'm not worried about her, but I'm actually more worried about what my reaction would be if I saw it.
Yep. And hey, I'm in the same boat, right? I mean, because same thing, my wife can handle herself. I think my kids look a little more Asian than Bill's kid does, right? But that said, I have hope. Like growing up in this environment, I see the kids around him, and I think they're going to grow up to be able to, to insulate the kids from it, right? Because it's not going to be as big of an issue, is my hope, right? That's not always going to be the case, but when it does occur, they're going to have people around them they're going to help stand up to that shit, right?
And not to say that any other kid, that could anyhow be a victim of violence, much less ridicule, has it coming. But I know Finn, I know Nate, I know Ellie. You guys are good dads. I'm not too worried about them. They'll handle themselves, especially Ellie. Really, how old is she?
She's 5.
She's fucking terrifyingly intimidating.
And every time I mention your name or she hears your name, she snarls.
Yeah.
Or growls.
Yeah. Yep.
Nice.
And let's just be clear. She doesn't like me because I resemble taking away my daughter, who is like she loves. So when I come there, it means it's time for Ava to go. Also, I'm a jerk to her.
Yes, you do tell her and my son that you are their real father.
Yeah,
about 50% of the time that you come to pick her up.
Is that true or
there's some concern?
It might be. Yeah. It's a possibility.
You suburbanites get up to weird things. I just need to check.
So I want to talk about a lot of things that happened this week, and obviously, Dan, I want to start with you because you're kind of fashioned yourself an expert in a way on COVID and certainly with vaccinations because of what you do for a living. But the big story obviously this week with COVID, I think the big story is kind of like the spikes that we didn't expect. Certainly what's going on in Michigan and kind of the conflict there between the state and federal government, hence being both being led by Democrats. It's certainly interesting. We could talk about that. But more importantly, the big story this week was Johnson & Johnson pressing the pause button. I did just read, a statistic. I think I just retweeted it on Twitter that more people died of gender reveal parties than the Pfizer vaccine or the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which was one woman apparently. But what are your thoughts on the fact that they decided to put a pause on it, take a look at it, because it's been pretty controversial this week as to what the outcome, what the consequences of that being, what that is in terms of messaging, Dan?
Yeah, so I think it was a good thing that they took the pause for sure. Simply because, right, so you have 6 cases in 6 million doses, right? So it's very, very rare. But the idea is that you extrapolate it out. Let's just say this becomes the most prominent vaccine. This can be put in more people, more doses. It looks like, we may have to get doses every year, booster shots every year. So, they want to make sure they get it right the first time, right? So, that's why I take a pause, review the data with as many big brains as possible. My assumption is that it's going to be fine, right? Simply because, many more things potentially induce clots at a much, much higher rate. But, I think it's a good idea to do what they did for now. But, the problem is now you're seeing, these people that were kind of hesitant. They're like, look now, right. Now there's an issue with clots. I'm glad I didn't get it. That's the problem. So how do you balance doing the right thing to show the system is working? How do you balance that with, the messaging and the information getting out there, or the information not getting the right information, not getting to the right people, right?
Did you guys hear about the former CDC director joining some company that says they can kill COVID?
No.
All right. Well, people look it up. I'm not read in on it. I just saw the headline, so we'll move on. Bill, what else? Any other questions or comments about COVID from this week, guys? That we need to maybe discuss or?
No, just the observation that the way that the shots are coming out, by July, things are going to blow up. People are going to be out. It's going to be. I can tell you, business wise, we're already seeing just this rocket launch of economic activity already. So we're kind of getting there.
July,
really getting there.
July, Dan? I feel like it might be earlier. I have no idea what I'm talking about, but it seems like we're moving pretty fast.
We are, but the rates are still much, much higher than they should be, right? So it is a race against the variants. We're not winning by any means. In certain areas we are.
What are you eating?
Pastrami sandwich.
Of course. I don't even know why. Of course you are. Why wouldn't you be having a pastrami sandwich for dinner? Let's let Dan eat, because he rushed here to make it here, and I appreciate that. But let's talk just a little bit. Let's get into some of the big stories from the week, guys. Bill, on foreign policy, there's two big stories. I think the pulling out of Afghanistan by September 11th, Joe Biden announcing that. A lot of criticism coming to that, and then of course the sanctions on Russia we can talk about, and I'm sure there are other things, but those are two stories I certainly wanted to get your take on. What are your thoughts on this announcement from Joe Biden telling the Taliban the date we're going to leave is the criticism?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when people start talking about symbolism, it doesn't mean shit. It doesn't. I mean, nobody remembers that the week or the day that we took the helicopters off the embassy in Saigon, right? So, and it's not like the Taliban are, some nuclear armed power that is a ideological foe of ours marching around the globe. Symbolic victories don't really matter that much for somebody who is basically a militia that lives in the mountains in the middle of nowhere. So that's kind of bullshit. That side of it's dumb. I mean, I have to tell you, I have mixed emotions about this, because I don't think that we were spending that much money or that much blood to keep a lot of women in that country from having a pretty awful fate if the Taliban win. And a lot of other ethnic groups in that country, really, things are going to go real bad for them. It is the smart geopolitical move to pull out. It is. It creates all kinds of problems for Pakistan and China and Iran and all these countries that we don't have a lot of, we don't love, and our keeping it stable actually helps them. They've been trying to mess with us for 20 years, in effect. They're all now, it's going to be their problem that they're going to have to deal with. We weren't going to be able to pull out effectively forever. It's going to be a 50-year commitment. Now, so I on the one hand, I get it. Geopolitically, it's smart. On the other hand, it's going to be a lot of suffering for other people.
There's no doubt about it. But yeah. let's be clear, though. When you hear my friend Richard Haas or anybody else, Lindsey Graham, anybody else talk about, well, you got to worry about them, reconstituting Al Qaeda and launching terrorist
attacks. I'm not worried about that.
That gets me so mad, and it's never been a good reason, because all you need is an internet connection to plan your terrorist attack. You do not need monkey bars in Kabul.
Yeah, and it's not clear, by the way, that the Taliban wants Al Qaeda back. They've been through that, and they're dealing now with ISIS, and people don't realize this, but the Taliban absolutely hate ISIS and have been killing them and have been fighting them. So, the idea that it's going to turn into this terrorist haven, maybe, but there are terrorists that operate out of Afghanistan now.
And again, let's remember the terrorist threat to the United States of America is mostly in Michigan and Montana.
Yeah, it's white guys. It's white guys with assault rifles in Michigan, right? So I'm not. I have very mixed emotions. I know what happened in Vietnam and Cambodia and places like that when we left, and I think that I mostly just want Americans to not just do this thing of pulling out and going, okay, not our problem anymore, and not face the cost that someone's going to pay.
Well, it's also worth mentioning that we went in there and broke it. And what responsibility do we have?
Afghanistan was broken. The Russians really broke it.
It's a good point. It's a good point.
But at the same time, we certainly drew a lot of blood and spilled a lot of blood and blew a lot of stuff up. But at the same time, I get it. It makes sense to pull out. Biden's doing the right thing. And by the way, in domestic American politics, it's going to be popular. It's smart politics.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Yes, I do.
And then quickly, before I play these a couple sound bites, I want to get your reaction to just the news on Russian sanctions and Konstantin Kilimnik. There's some really important big news, but the Biden administration announced sanctions. Some people are saying that it won't matter, but they're saying the sanctions are as a result of the SolarWinds hack. And the story about Russian bounties on Americans in Afghanistan, although the sourcing on that is looking weaker and weaker, apparently. But what do you make of these sanctions? How big a deal of it are they? And what about this story about Konstantin Kilimnik, which kind of basically has always been what you've been beating that Kilimnik drum for years about collusion.
7 years.
Yeah.
So first off, that whole bounty thing, it's turning out there's low confidence that the Russian bounties on American troops is true. And it really underlines what absolute shit the Trump guys were at their job, because they could have killed that story a year and a half ago and they didn't. So that kind of tells you how bad they were at all of this. But when it comes to the sanctions with Russia, what the Biden administration did, they sanctioned buying Russian sovereign debt. And a lot of American pension funds and BlackRock, a lot of these people own a lot of Russian sovereign debt. That's basically a way to print money for the Russians. People can buy their debt. They can fund all of their things like trying to maybe invade Ukraine. So it's sort of a 70% hard shot. Now, if the Biden administration said they're kicking them out of SWIFT and we're not letting, we're going to sanction Gazprom, you'd affect millions of people. And that would be kind of waving a red flag and saying you might as well attack Ukraine. So I think it's a really calculated, smart, and good sanction. Sanctions do have more of an effect than people realize. It's just not dramatic. So it's good. And by the way, the Russians are freaking out. It's why they have most of their army on the Ukrainian border. They are freaking out.
Yeah,
about
why are
this
they doing that?
Well, because Putin is on the horns of a dilemma. Rather than betting on development and institutions, he bet on the oligarchy and the military, right? And so in effect, that means he moved resources from regular people in Russia and put them into the rich people and the security services. Well, when you mess with their ability to sell their own debt, it cuts down more and more on the pie that he has to give, both to the oligarchs, to the military, the KGB, whatever, and also like even harder to fund pensions for regular people. And the problem is, right, if you piss off regular people, maybe you get a color revolution. If you piss off the oligarchs and the military, maybe they overthrow you. So he's got this balancing act that he's got to try to carry out. And, this is why, by the way, I think it's not unlikely he tries to invade Ukraine and take another chunk, because that's a way to both satisfy the military and try to make regular people feel patriotic. I don't think that would work. I think it would be potentially a regime-ending move. But I think we're in a really dangerous position now. And this is why Biden in his speech today was like, I am not looking for escalation. I am trying to create a dialogue. And when Biden said that today, I went, oh, shit. They know the Russians are thinking about it.
A very interesting analysis. Hard to believe that you just own parking garages, right, Dan?
Sure, well, let me talk about Kilimnik, by the way.
Oh, right.
Super fast. Kilimnik, all I want to say is, I was so right. Come on.
Yeah, you were. It's been annoying how often I've heard from you on this. Every time.
Matt Taibbi was like pouring scorn on me on your show. And I was so right. And I would love to just see him in the street and be like, dude, yeah, you suck. I got you. But the bottom line is this. Kilimnik was an intelligence agent for the Russians. Paul Manafort gave Kilimnik the polling data for the Trump campaign, which Kilimnik then passed on to his superiors in Moscow. The Russians then, we think, were able to use that to target voters on Facebook and everywhere else. So the narrative before was always that, Trump got help from the Russians to beat Hillary. The reality is that the Trump campaign gave the Russians information so that the Russians could influence the American public to help him beat Hillary Clinton. And it's a big distinction. And it's kind of why, because the former narrative was what controlled for everything, it's kind of why the media missed it. They were looking for a less complicated story. And the real story is that there was very much collusion. It was just that the Trump people were giving them information instead of the other way around.
And the evidence is that you see, the information that he gave to the Russians is that these are the areas, these are the districts, these are the states and districts where we need to eke out just a little bit, right? Where gerrymandering and vote suppression may not work as much. We need help here. And that's exactly where, and now you can tag these ads and these posts.
They found those areas where those people lived, and then they targeted them on Facebook where you can do that. I can do that. One of the last gigs I did that I promoted was in South Carolina, and I got a Facebook ad and targeted Charleston. And by the way, it worked. A lot of people came out, but that's exactly what they did by targeting them with social media posts that lived in certain areas, as Dan just said. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a thing you're going to hear from people like Matt Taibbi will say, oh, there's no proof that the Russians use this information. There's no proof that they changed anybody's mind. The problem is you're not going to be able to prove it.
Right? You can't prove that. The point is they tried. The point is that Paul Manafort gave a fucking Russian secret intelligence guy the information, and that's game, set, match as far as I'm concerned. All right, Dan McDonald, you tweeted today a thing about today. We saw Anthony Fauci on Capitol Hill. He was at a house. What hearing was this? What committee? I don't know. But Jim with the GYM, Jordan, grilled Dr. Anthony Fauci. And do we need to set it up anymore, Dan or Bill, before I play this?
Give us your best guess then.
I just did.
No, you didn't. You didn't give us a time.
Okay, you guys can tell me to stop it anytime and talk over it. All right, here we go. Give us your best guess. Here we go. More.
When do you think this is good? Are we going to be here 2 years from now wearing masks?
No, I don't.
Ask Dr. Fauci the same question.
Well, let me answer your ranting again.
You're ranting again. Real quick, just the fact that you would anybody would treat another person this way in general, much less this guy whose career, Dan, has spanned a lot of pandemics from AIDS to Ebola and Jim Jordan, who's done nothing, really is the thing that got me the most. Just the imbalance of these two men and what they've accomplished.
I mean, literally, Fauci is one of the most prolific scientists, not talk about his time as an administrator. He's one of the most prolific scientists that we've had, right? In terms of number of publications, the number of citations, just absolutely amazing, the amount of effort that he put in over the course of his career, right? And he's led the effort against, HIV and other pandemics and now COVID, right? So, but and to offer zero courtesy to him for that, it just shows exactly who they are, right?
Here's more.
Let me
I'm not ranting.
Yes, you are.
No, here's how it works, Dr. Fauci.
Right.
I get to ask you the questions. You're the highest paid official in the United States government. You've given us your advice on baseball, on dating apps, on cruise ships. You told us 0 masks, 1 mask, 2 masks, now back to 1 mask. I'm just asking you, when is it going to end? You can say I'm ranting. I'm actually asking the question that the citizens I get the privilege of representing, and my name actually goes on a ballot. I don't think your name's ever been on a ballot. My name goes on a ballot. The citizens I represent want to know the answer to when they can get their liberties back.
Bill, liberties. When can they get their liberty? What do you make so far of this?
I mean, it's standard issue, Father Coughlin style horse shit to pour on the mushrooms that are the supporters of the Republican Party in his district. I mean, that's it. It's, there's no analysis to be done there. The guy's a populist, fucking reactionary piece of crap.
20 more seconds.
You can call that ranting. I actually call it standing up for the Constitution, which I take an oath to uphold, Dr. Fauci, every year, every term that I serve in this Congress representing the folks in the 4th District of Ohio. So it is not ranting. It is defending the First Amendment.
Bye, Gary.
And we'd like an answer, or your best guess, since you got an answer for everything else.
Well,
I didn't even play the clip of Maxine Waters telling him to shut the fuck up, but...
Give that dude a top hat, a cane, and a fake mustache, because that is pure performative theater. That's all that is.
Yeah. I don't know if I told you guys I was going to play this clip, but it needs no introduction. I just want to get your reaction. It's 1 minute. I'm going to play the whole thing and try not to be sexually aroused.
I look forward to the testimony today. I'll just speak for myself here. I've come to conclude that climate change is real.
Oh.
That human emissions create greenhouse gas effect that traps heat, and that you see a rise in the oceans and acidity in the water and droughts and disruption of weather patterns. That makes sense to me.
That throat clearing.
I've been to Norway with Senator McCain, Greenland, I think, with Senator McCain and Senator Clinton at the time, and Alaska. The native people in those regions have seen a dramatic change. So count me in on the idea that the science is real. The solutions, I think, are becoming more obvious to me. There are 3 areas of carbon emissions, basically, in our lives: transportation, power production, and living.
Oh, living. Welcome to 2004, Linz.
Wow. So we've got the life and liberty part. We just need the pursuit of happiness. We're good. What makes me feel good about that, honestly, is that because Lindsey Graham is the most opportunist person in American politics probably ever. And it tells you that now the opportunistic people are realizing, time to get on the climate change bandwagon. So much as he grosses me out and I would love to see him fall into a volcano, I'm still happy that, that is becoming the default position of even the Lindsey Grahams of this world.
Dan, what do you make of Lindsey Graham recognizing the science on climate change from 20 years ago?
So, I agree with Bill, right? So I think it's for him, the people that listen to him, it's all about the messenger and not about the message, right? So they're going to take on the message, presumably, right, to some extent. So it doesn't really matter what the message is. It's him saying it. So even though he's the most optimistic person there, people that have listened to him for the last couple of years in particular,
who are
yeah, right. But it is an opening for people to actually hear something that is actually true, right? And it really he sounds like a big old libtard there, and I love it.
He sounds like a real libtard. And did you hear him say, "Count me in"? Do you remember the last? Remember when he said, "Count me out"? Do you remember when that was, guys?
With Trump, right after the 6th of January.
After the insurrection, he said, listen, I have been with Trump this whole time, but after count me out. And then like an hour later, he's like, I'm back in.
Of course. Yeah.
But it was quite arousing, Pete. Thanks for playing.
Yeah,
that.
Sorry about that. I know you weren't expecting to be aroused. I love that your son just popped up in the frame. It scared me a little bit. But Finn popping up in Bill's Zoom frame is not nearly as scary or surprising as woke Pat Robertson boys. Listen to this.
Also, I want to say, I think a lot of people are thinking like I was, that both the gun and the taser would be put on your dominant side, but it's not that way.
Yeah, but they have to cross where they have them different.
So you actually have to reach across yourself.
Yeah, you feel the difference.
It's definitely.
They're holding Pat Robertson and his co-host, this woman who is so lucky to have an opportunity to work with him and get to speak on panel, are holding a taser and a gun. I didn't set this up at all. Let me play more.
There's just no comparison. As I say, they're not making tasers in this yellow color anymore. They're making they did it in black. They're making them yellow. Now, how she made the difference was she shot that poor guy to death, saying, "This is what I thought. This is what I thought was my taser." And if you can't tell the difference in the feel of those things, it's crazy. Anyhow, she deserves. But I am pro-police, folks. I think we need the police. We need their servants, and they do a good job. But if they don't stop this onslaught, they cannot do this. The police in Virginia picked up a lieutenant in the Army and began to give him trouble. And our state police are highly trained. But why they don't stop this? And this thing is going on in Minnesota, but the Derek Chauvin, they ought to put him under the jail. He has caused so much trouble.
Wow. Woke Pat Robertson under the jail. The Crypt Keeper has spoken, Dan. What are your thoughts on Pat Robertson being so woke and kind of critical of law enforcement?
Again, I'm quite speechless at this point, but the same thing, right? It's about the messenger, about him. The people are going to hear that. They're going to at least internalize some of this stuff for the first time. That most people that listen to him didn't hear about the lieutenant who was arrested in Virginia, right? So listen, I'll take it at this point. It's about getting the message out and getting the right messengers to get it out there.
Bill, what do you think of Pat Robertson and his lovely sweater and his female co-host and his taser and his gun and his rhetoric? And his
I gotta tell you, when you're right, you're right. And that crazy old fucking lunatic is right in this one. He says something interesting. I'm not sure if it was in that clip or in a longer one, where he's like, don't these police think about their public image? And it's really great. So something to that effect. And it's really kind of on where he's going like, all you got to do is look at it. And it's awful.
Yeah,
right?
Listen to his language. He uses the word onslaught. This is an onslaught.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right? That's interesting. Like when it has penetrated that deeply into someone like Pat Robertson, that tells you quite a bit.
And it is hard to penetrate into Pat Robertson because that skin is thick and old.
Well, underneath that red sweater, his head is just attached to a life support vat. And what I understand is that is actually burnished steel. So
yeah.
Yeah, at this point, he's just one big sunspot. That's all he is.
He's a liver spot.
Yeah, he's a liver spot, exactly.
All right, boys,
Nice.
We're out of time because we actually are taping this right before the weekly hangout, which hopefully you guys will stop by. But Bill B in D.C., Dan McDonald, I'll have both their links, their Twitter and in the show notes and everything else. I appreciate you guys joining me at the last second to go through some of the week's news and analysis. That was fun and smart, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Pete.
We don't blame you. We're better than Finnegan anyway. So
that's right.
Shots fired.
You know what? We're better than nothing, right? Number one. Number two, breaking news. I finished my pastrami sandwich.
Nice. That is,
Well
show
done,
us the
sir.
plate.
Well done.
It's such a weird dinner choice. I would have guessed it, but that looks delicious. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Bill.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
All right. Thank you very much, Dan Macdonald and Bill Boyle. Dan is on Twitter at DanMac4. He's great there on Twitter, as is, of course, Bill B in DC on Twitter as well. By the way, Christian Finnegan, unfortunately, unable to join me, but he is headlining the Washington, D.C. Improv Comedy Club, great comedy club in D.C. If you want to go out and see him, then by all means, I hope that you can. You feel safe doing it. Then definitely do, because he is a hilarious stand-up comedian. But that was awesome, talking to Bill and Dan. They are smart and funny, and I thought that would be a great last-minute replacement. So glad they were available to do it. And then after that, we went right into the Zoom. A lot I missed here in the top. I didn't really do the normal last 24 that I do, but that was fun. It was a little bit different. I always like to have do different things, especially on a Friday. But don't worry, I'm still going to do a news dump. I say we do it right now, shall we?
Angry swarm of honeybees form a massive clump. They're waiting in your car on today's news dump.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, no, another great news dump jingle from Pete Coe, the bees. That one really scared me. Thanks, Pete. I say we start in Japan, shall we, where they are considering canceling the Olympics. 100 days to go before the Olympic Games. Japan is lagging behind in vaccinations. What is going on in Japan? How come they're lagging behind? Only a few months left to go before the Tokyo Olympics are set to begin. One of Japan's top officials suggested the games could be canceled or carried out without fans. Definitely be following that story. Boston has marked 8 years since the bombing at the 2013 Boston Marathon killed 3 people, injured scores of others with quiet moments of reflection and small acts of kindness, according to the Associated Press. 8 years since the marathon bombing that killed 3 people. Stick with the Associated Press, who are reporting some pretty interesting economic news with layoffs down and spending up. U.S. rebound gains momentum is the headline. A much-awaited economic boom coming off the pandemic recession appeared to edge closer to reality Thursday, with fresh data showing the pace of layoffs dwindling. Consumers spending freely and manufacturing rebounding. So I guess that's good news for the economy. How's it going for your economy? Did you get your taxes done? You know, tax day was bumped back to May 17th. My wife just learned that today. She didn't know that, so maybe other people don't as well. Also, retail sales are surging, calling it a spring boom. Like I said, jobless claims lowest since COVID began. Stocks are smashing an all-time high, and the housing market has 4 million units short of buyer demand. So interesting economic data right there. James O'Keefe has been banned by Twitter. That's a pretty interesting story. This asshole kid who just basically edits all kinds of video. He's a right-wing asshole who should be in jail. He's the founder of Project Veritas. Permanently suspended from Twitter on Thursday, and apparently he is now going to sue Twitter. The ban comes after Project Veritas released some, as always, surreptitiously recorded videos of a CNN technical director criticizing the network while on what he thought were dates with a woman who was posing as a nurse. NASA is worried about, let's go to Mars, where NASA is worried about its $800 million InSight lander as it's entered emergency hibernation on Mars. InSight landed on Mars in 2018, but has recently been fighting for its life due to extreme weather conditions. Yikes. Come on, you can do it! Breathe, InSight lander, breathe! I don't know why I'm trying to revive a droid on Mars. I'm sorry. This is a weird headline. Hybrid monkey-human embryos have been created in a lab for the first time in a scientific breakthrough. The groundbreaking work could one day lead to a vast increase in the number of available organs for transplant. Some critics say it raises serious ethical questions. Really? I mean, what could go wrong here? I'm surprised that there are so many ethical questions about this. How about this headline? Left alone, rhinoceroses are increasing in number. A lack of tourists and more investment have aided the habitat in Nepal. Nepal has counted 752 one-horned rhinos in 4 national parks, the most in more than 20 years, and the pandemic could be one of the reasons for the increase. How about that? Human beings leave nature, other species alone, and they tend to be healthier. What a surprise. A new law in New Hampshire would fix a cat-dog inequity. Drivers who kill cats would have to notify owners just like they do with dogs. Boy, I didn't even know that was a thing. The Associated Press writes, 9 lives notwithstanding, killing a cat in a hit and run could soon become illegal in New Hampshire, according to the Associated Press. 40 years ago, New Hampshire passed a law that requires drivers who injure or kill dogs to notify police or the animal's owners or else face a $1,000 fine. Cats and other pets were left out, but the state legislature is currently considering an expansion that would give cats and canines equal standing. Fight for cat equality. And where does this, can you imagine political arguments? Where does this slippery slope end? Or we have to notify you if we hit a guinea pig or a hamster or a snake? I don't know why I became comedian Dave Attell on that, sorry. And last night, I had to take a nap in the car because my daughter was in dance, and I have to take my nap before I do the podcast at night, before I do the final touches, the opening and so on. And then I left the pillow out in the cart, and I didn't want to go out and get it. So I slept on like a folded up towel. How about that? Have you ever done that? Am I alone? Please email me. Standupwithpete at gmail.com. Let me know I'm not alone. I need to feel comforted that I'm not the only person that would ever just forget his pillow and sleep on a towel. All right, that's it for the news dump and the opening. Thank you very much again to Dan and Bill. That was a lot of fun. And now it's time to get to my very special guest, who is an old friend of mine who used to join me on the SiriusXM show a lot of times. Last time we spoke was actually on January 6th, the day of the insurrection. I remind her that here on the show. She's an editor-at-large now at the Daily Beast. She's the author of Paper Gods, a novel that came out in 2018. And she knows just about everybody in the world. She's so well-connected, so smart, so passionate, has lived many lives, and I'm so glad to get her back on the podcast. She is on Twitter at Goldie Taylor. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Goldie Taylor right now.
There she is, and I'm so excited to see you, and I'm so happy that you were available to talk to me today, and I'm always honored and flattered that you would spend some time talking to me. The last time we talked, Goldie Taylor, you remember when?
Actually, it's not been so long ago now, right? So before that, it had been a while, but the last time, we had a conversation, voting and everything else.
But it was January 6th. It was that day.
We did it on January 6th?
You know what was funny? Because I was like, we hadn't talked in a long time. And I said, and we had appointment to meet on January 6th, virtually, obviously. And shit was going down, and I was like, Goldie's probably going to want to cancel, and that's fine with me because, I want to watch this. But I was happy you didn't, and then we had a great conversation that day. But yeah, that was the day. It was all going on in the background, literally.
I was hot that day. I don't even know how I got more than 2 or 3 words out of my mouth. It was just so stunning to me, right?
Well, it was a time in the day when we talked that it had kind of just started. I feel like it hadn't gotten to where it gotten. And then frankly, even now, I'll start by asking you this. Like looking back at January 6th, even now that when you think about it, you're like, wow, I was watching them break the windows in the Capitol yesterday. I was like, wow, I can't believe that happened, that they did that. They broke into the Capitol. It still feels that way almost 100 days later. Your thoughts on it? This much time has passed.
I think one, I'm still stunned that it went down. I am super stoked about the citizen investigator now, right? People put a lot of, mishmash on whether or not people ought to sort of be investigating from their homes. But without that, the FBI wouldn't have been able to round up as many people, really as they have, sort of doing all the coding with cell phones and that kind of thing. But, these social media investigators have been tracking people down, and it's been amazing. And so I'm glad to see that some justice is being served. I'd like to see the totality of it because, if there aren't real consequences for the people who incited it, if there aren't real consequences, it will happen again.
Do you think that the ubiquity of cameras in these videos that we're seeing is affecting anybody's behavior? Because I don't see it yet, but from what we saw yesterday in South Carolina with the king of all assholes on his sidewalk, to these police officers in the past couple of weeks, especially being filmed, do you think, whether it be a police officer, you would think they would think a lot more about it, much less the guy on the sidewalk, much less the woman in the Walmart, screaming at a Muslim person? Do you think that we are at a point yet where people say, you know what, I'm not going to behave that way because I don't want to destroy my life, or I don't want to get arrested when this video comes out? Are we at any kind of point where people have a self-awareness of, I'm not going to be an asshole, even though I am one, because everybody's filming?
Well, first of all, assholes never think they're assholes. Come on, like saying, like proclaiming, I am a racist. Who does that, right? So, but the funny thing is, to me, the ironic thing, and maybe this isn't funny because his military career is coming crashing down. I don't know how good of a drill sergeant he really was in the first place, but that guy on the sidewalk didn't look so tough in the mugshot. Am I right? So I just feel like cameras change the math. They change the math at least for most things on the outcome. People are having to pay for behavior that they otherwise could have done in the dark, right? And so that's happening. Whether or not that really plays itself out in the justice system remains to be seen. But let's look back. Walter Scott. We never would have known that Walter Scott was shot in the back and that he had a weapon planted on him, but for a cell phone camera being pointed, by a kid who was on his way to work that day and just happened to see it going down in that field, right? We would not have known, what happened to, Eric Garner, and watching him being choked out on the sidewalk. We saw that. We saw what happened to George Floyd, right? And so, we didn't see what happened to Emmett Till.
Or Trayvon Martin or Michael Brown.
Trayvon Martin or Michael Brown. We saw the aftermath of Michael Brown, but we really didn't see all of it. Now we're seeing it in its totality, but we're also seeing white women in bagel shops cuss over masks, call people racist. So, this thing is going really far. So now there are at least some social costs to pay.
What is
whether or not there's going to be real criminal costs to pay, that's up to a judge and a jury.
Yeah, that's all really good points, of course. So does the ubiquity of cameras, I just want to keep using the word ubiquity. It has changed a lot of people's views. White people are for sure waking up because of the videos, or people who don't live in black communities or in black skin are going, wow. But how I've been kind of saying it is, obviously not enough, but a lot are. And how I've been saying it is black people are just saying, yeah, none of this is surprising. We've been being terrorized forever. And so how do you analyze how people are seeing how black folks, minorities, are being treated by police officers? But we always, we knew that, we suspected that there's a lot of history there. But just, in the bagel shop, on the sidewalk, at the pool, we're seeing that now all the time. How is that changing anything? Are people waking up more because we're seeing it? And what's the difference between the way that non-black people see it and black folks see it?
No, I think that's absolutely true. I see civil rights, social justice in three waves in this country. And I think that Dr. King, sort of led that second wave. But Dr. King knew this. Show it to them, right? So you walk the Edmund Pettus Bridge, Central Bridge, everybody, and you do it in a nonviolent way. And then you let them unleash their brutality in a way that the world's cameras will see it, in a way that shocks the consciousness that has happened. And so Dr. King knew that you got to make them famous, because what they're allowed to do in the dark, they will continue to do. And unless you bring, open this up to the social pressure, unless you put some real current social currency behind this, then, the brutality will continue. And so what I would say is those lessons are being played out today in different ways. And so it may not be the ABC News camera. It may not be the documentarian that's doing it. It may be, the kid on the corner who happens to have a smartphone, who can capture this. And so it's now in the hands, of the masses. And we have this social media piece that we can proliferate, information, video in ways that, quite frankly, we couldn't have done in 65. Think of how 65 may have played out if social media was a thing, right? If smartphones was a thing, how much more quickly would justice have unfolded, if we had been able to put it forth in an undeniable way. And so that's happening today. I think it's a step forward, but until police officers cannot turn off those cameras, until they have some real consequences for shutting off, a breast cam, then, we've got some real problems. So there is a ways to go in terms of reforming and, adding some meat to all of this. But the ubiquitous nature of cameras is changing the math.
I wish you could film financial crimes.
God, yeah. But the wonderful thing about financial crimes is it used to be pen and paper. You type, you can hide things. You have digital footprints now.
Right,
Same
that's
thing.
true. That's true.
Digital footprints act like cameras for financial crime. So we're able to get to what Bernie Madoff did. And do not rest his soul. Do not rest in power. See you later, alligator, right? So, but we would not have been able to track what Bernie Madoff did, but for the digital nature of financial transactions today.
I wonder what his job in hell is. I wonder what they gave him.
Water boy.
I love how you said that like you already knew, like someone DM'd you.
I have friends who lost money, to Bernie Madoff, and so it's close.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. How the mighty hath fallen, right?
Sometimes.
I feel sorry for what happened to his family. His sons, his wife, DeRuth, who, wasn't a part of, his hijinks, and they suffered mightily, for his crimes. And so, yeah, Waterboy's good.
Who don't you know? I'm going to name famous, influential people. You wrote, you have this great tweet. I just retweeted it, and I think it kind of, it's one of the most important things. It ties a lot together. We certainly learned about this process after Michael Brown in Ferguson. I didn't realize the extent of it, but you tweeted, "It is the systemic stripping of wealth from predominantly black neighborhood using traffic tickets, code citations, and other methods. Pick your average low-level offense on a traffic stop. Who's paying? Us." Explain how this ties so many of these communities, neighborhoods, and frankly, victims together.
To go to traffic court on any given day and see who's lining the wall waiting for their names to be called. It's black and brown people predominantly. Yes, white people get speeding tickets, absolutely. But for the low-level stuff, hanging an air freshener in the back window, right? Having a broken taillight, failing the signal, that is the pretext for stopping over-policing non-white communities. And so I saw it coming up in St. Louis, and this is how this kind of all ties together. In St. Louis County, there are a myriad of small jurisdictions, right? Little townships that have 2,700 people or 1,800 people or maybe 10,000 people, all in the span of one county that ain't so big, right? And these townships would use policing traffic stops to fund their municipal operations. Fund the police force. They use code citations. Did you cut your lawn? Those kinds of things. I got more tickets for being a domino driver when I was 16 than I can count, but that's another story for another day. But what I would say is you can drive down one road in St. Louis, Natural Bridge, and you can pass through about 12 different jurisdictions and going 3 miles over the speed limit. You can get 12 different tickets that day, right? And so I knew that was the pretext for over-policing in St. Louis. And when I saw Michael Brown laying in that street, I said, oh, my God, And so that Saturday when he was killed, that Monday I was in St. Louis. It's my hometown. I was on MSNBC that Tuesday night, and I used a phrase that I still talk about today, policing for profit. And that was the impetus then for what Attorney General Holder did when he went in to put that consent decree around Ferguson, because Ferguson was, in effect, profiting off of these low-level offenses. And what happens is you get this ticket. They compound it with other things. They search the car. They look for things, right? They get you into court. And if you missed that date because you had to go to work, then they put out a warrant for you. And by the way, all the stuff goes to a collection agent. You're on parole. You're on probation until the fine is paid off, but then you're paying probation fees, yada, 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 until suddenly you've got this huge collection on your credit, or you spend some time in jail because of this. You've lost your job. You lose your apartment, your car note. You're behind now on child support, which is another infraction. So when you look at all of this, there are profit centers built around being black and poor in this country. And our police forces are the enforcers. So when you look at it, for instance, marijuana, which I say should be legal everywhere. I'm not a smoker. I'm agnostic about it, right? But
that's a shame.
My kids will be happy to hear this. So what I would say is when you look at the notion that compare zip codes in a black neighborhood, you're 6 times more likely to be arrested on minor pot, infractions than you are if you're a white college student, say at Columbia. But the smoking rate, ain't it all different? the money is coming from us and not from them. Yeah, and that's kind of my issue with this whole policing for profit thing. But when you look at, for instance, what happened to Dante, the stopping of him with this air freshener, right? The having missed a court date due to a minor, marijuana infraction. When you look at Breonna Taylor's case, for instance, when she's in her house sleeping with her boyfriend and her ex-boyfriend has been arrested in another part of town on a huge drug bust, but they overheard him in jail saying that Breonna was probably holding some cash for him, which she wasn't, by the way, but he said it because he was trying to get out of jail and get people to go to his bond. Well, the police said, whoa, there's money at this Breonna Taylor's house. They develop a pretext to go and bust her house with a no-knock warrant, not because they knew he was there, but because they thought money was inside. There was no money. That girl died. They went in there because through forfeiture laws, you can take the cash you find in a drug bust, right? You don't have to give it back. You can spend it on new police cars, on buildings, on roads, on whatever you want to spend it on new bulletproof vests, or the militarization of police departments. So I say all of that to say this stuff is driven by cash. And who can least afford it? Us.
I feel like a lot of what you just explained was well documented in Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. But I feel like that was, when I read that book, every page I was learning. I was like, that happens? That's a thing? And just being astonished by the laws, especially what you just explained about forfeiture and so on. But you explaining it, like she wrote about, and it's been a while. I got to reread that book, but I think she does use anecdotes to illustrate these policies. But you were just using anecdotes to illustrate those policies. It's not just a theory. They actually do it, and people's lives are destroyed over and over. I was also thinking, as you're explaining the whole chain reaction of how things happen in real life, it's so hard for poor people in general, but especially for poor black folks who are more likely targeted, to get ahead. You get 2 steps ahead. You're doing okay. You got this job. You're making up for mistakes that you didn't even know that you were making in the last time. And all of a sudden, you're set way back. And what that devolves into, it's just the psychology, the chain reaction of all of it. I think you explained it so well, but people still have a hard time understanding, embodying the information that you just explained if they don't experience it or see someone that they know experience it in real life. And that was, I didn't end in a question, but I wanted to.
No. My grandmother said it was real expensive to be poor. It costs money to be poor. Yeah. It costs money to be poor.
The hardest job in the world.
Hardest job in the world is to be poor in this country. And so I think that's, a huge part of what's driving this stuff. I mean, it's why you pull guns on a man who may have allegedly had a fake $20 bill. It's why you pull a taser. The taser shouldn't have been pulled. You want to pull a taser, but you pull your gun on somebody who's being stopped on a minor traffic stop because you've got this implicit bias and you are afraid of generalized fear of black men. And so you're a 26-year veteran, but you're so flustered that there's a black man in a car who is accused of a minor traffic offense that you're reaching for a weapon of any kind.
That's wild.
Right? That's wild.
By the way, you mentioned Dwayne Wright's case. He gets pulled over. It's still hard to know exactly what happened. It's still being fleshed out, but he gets pulled over for whatever, expired registration or air freshener. And then they find the warrant for marijuana. They also, you didn't mention, apparently a gun charge. But here's the thing about those 2 charges. I don't know who pointed this out, but I thought it was fascinating. Both of those things that he was cited for, charged for, the marijuana and the gun, they are completely legal in many, many states. In many, many states, you can obviously possess, grow, have a certain amount of marijuana. And in many, many states, you can conceal and carry and not even have to something like register all that. Like, the point is, what he was cited for, it's controversial in that those 2 things, laws that apparently he broke, are not illegal in many other jurisdictions in the United States of America. And I think that matters a great deal because he lost his life over things that are illegal in other states.
Well, first of all, Second Amendment rights apply to everybody but us. Whenever we've seen real gun reform in this country, it's because they thought too many black people had guns. That's why the assault weapons ban in the 90s happened, right? It wasn't because of white people in AR-15s. It was because they thought black people had too much access to
Reagan, guns. Right? Reagan, too, with a bunch of black people showing up with guns.
Yeah, it was Reagan, and then came back with Clinton and all this other stuff. And so, yeah, it was that. So, and marijuana, the same thing. It's not controversial until we have it, right? And so these things, I say again, are pretext. Rittenhouse, Kyle, somebody raised $2 million to get that kid out of jail. He not only had a gun, he killed some people, right?
Ricky Schroeder. Silver
Schroeder.
Spoons. He was like,
it used to be my favorite show in school, man.
Me too.
I'm heartbroken over this. I thought Ricky was all.
Although I interviewed him back at Sirius, and there was a lot of red flags, Goldie, a lot. This is like maybe 5 years ago, but I was like, this guy is like a neoconservative. What's he talking about? Anyway,
it's problematic. Yes, he's less cute to me now. but I would say that a gun isn't controversial until it's in the other hand, right? Not when, I don't see, the NRA out there stumping saying, Dante Wilson had every right to have a gun. These gun laws are too onerous. They're saying, no, he should have been picked up and he should have been shot because, right? And so I think that's kind of the dichotomy for me in hearing all of these arguments is that our friend Adam Serwer has something he calls the Rice Rule. And I think it is as prescient as anything that I've ever heard. And it basically goes like this. There is no circumstance in which a Black body cannot be blamed for its own murder, plunder, or maiming. There is no circumstance in which that, in the minds of folks, cannot be justified. There is no such thing as innocent. There is no such thing as, didn't deserve it. They can find some way to put the onus on, no matter what the travesty is. They can find some way to put the onus back on the Black body. Look at Tamir Rice, after whom this rule is named. Kid playing in a snowy park, 12 years old.
Yep. That's on video.
Shot on video, shot almost before the squad car's wheels stopped rolling. So, no time to respond to any order, put your hands up, put your hands down, that kind of thing. We heard, the conflicting orders that were coming out of the mouths of the cops in Virginia for Lieutenant Nazario. Get your hands on the wheels, get out, move this, that. He's like, hey, I'm honestly afraid. And what do they say? You should be afraid.
You should be.
Impunity. And they knew they had cameras on. They knew that cameras were rolling.
If you're a cop and you say you should be afraid, you generally I'm trying to think of a scenario or circumstance where that isn't like certainly a reprimandable or fireable offense. You should be afraid because we don't talk enough about police tactics, but everybody understands escalating or de-escalating an argument with your wife, with your kid, whatever. I mean, I do it all the time. I'm like, where do I want to go with this? How do I make this better? And I often screw it right there.
I do it with an 8-year-old. Hey, whoa. But you learn skills.
But you should be afraid from a police officer to anybody is I can't find a context in when that would ever be appropriate. But let me go back to the blaming of the victim kind of thing is what you were, if I were to shorten what you were saying. You just responded. I was going through your Twitter feed before we started talking to this cartoon villain on Twitter, a guy named Matt Walsh, who went through a lot of these victims and said that they had other crimes they had committed. And what it sounded like,
they deserve to die is what he said.
They deserve to die. And so you can find anything in anybody's life. I guess it assuages the guilt of mine, the white person, or whoever else wants to be okay with us defend the cop. Because listen, he's done bad things. You have to be able to dehumanize somebody to some extent to be okay with them being killed in cold blood, I suppose. I can't explain it.
I punched Pat King's lights out in the 8th grade and then told her that if she came back the next day, she could get it again. Does Matt Walsh think that it's okay if a cop kills me because I have a violent history that dates back to the 8th grade? Probably, right? He would whip that out. He'd call that assault, felony assault and battery. She's got a violent history. They only do that to us. And so I think you do have to dehumanize some people in the same way. But you see my response.
Yeah. Your response. Don't say his name. Don't say his name.
That dude got Burger King. But
Charleston church shooter. Yeah.
Elijah McClain got ketamine. So that's the difference. You had a kid who shot 9 saints in the basement of a church, that they get him pulled over and they give him some Burger King during the questioning. You got another kid who says, look, I'm an introvert. I'm socially awkward. He's telling you, look, I'm a little weirdo, but I don't mean any harm, right? They shoot this kid up with ketamine and kill him. So that's the difference between what it means to be Black in America. That's what it means when my son, who's 30 years old, and he walks out the door every day. That's what he confronts. When he wakes up in the morning, my son is a suspect before he eats breakfast.
I think that's what sometimes people don't understand. I had to learn it. I remember my mom actually told me when I was a young man, and she was a public school teacher in Syracuse City School Districts, and they were trying to teach the white teachers how to be able to relate to and teach half their students, which are Black. And this guy gave a talk to these white teachers, I'm sure Black teachers as well, and basically said what you said. When I wake up in the morning, the first thing I think of is I'm in black skin. And I hear that a lot. And I think that's the difference in a way between the adversity of poor white folks. We could hypothetical poor white person who has a horrible life, this white person has suffered every type of abuse. But they don't actually wake up worrying about that one thing. They wake up worrying about everything else. How are they going to pay their bills? How are they going to overcome this disability? How are they going to deal with their assailant today? But they don't have to worry at least about that one thing. I feel like that's one way to illustrate the difference, but I'm sure you have a much smarter, better way.
I don't know if it's smarter, but I do know that I hear all the time, Goldie, when you going to get over it, right? Slavery was 100 years ago, or, when you going to get over, when you going to stop playing the Black card? I'm saying, well, when you going to stop playing it on me? When are you going to stop reminding me that my Blackness means something ugly to you, something hyper-criminalized, something deeply immoral? When are you going to stop playing the card on me and my life? Because I'm losing my life over the card, right? And so if I hold your own card back up to you, is that me playing it? Or is that me just saying, hey, look what you've put on the table, right?
Yeah, that's true of women and minority. Like as a white guy, if I'm on if I say write a tweet, or if I'm on a prominent TV show, and two examples would be like Real Time or Joe Rogan, like both of those appearances of mine, I got attacked. Yeah. But it was never for my whiteness or my manness. It was always like, you're a stupid idiot, and there were mean things people said, but it was never that. Whereas on whether it be social media or just in regular space, moving through space, you can be attacked, you can be criticized, you can be targeted for your gender and the color of your skin. And that's just something that you can't move past it if you're constantly being reminded of it, is what it sounded like you said.
I heard somebody said to me the other day, and obviously they weren't aware of who they were talking to. And we were talking about sort of the landscape today for, communications, marketing, all this kind of stuff. And she said to me, and she's a former marketer, it is a good time to be Black in this country, Goldie. And I said, for who? I love being Black, by the way. I love the skin I'm in, right? But I said, from whose perspective? Because mine are still dying. Mine are still, suffering under mass incarceration. Mine are still disproportionately poor. Mine are still, and I kind of went down the list, mine disproportionately have, are facing the health inequity, the wealth gap, you name, the social measure or metric. And mine are still suffering. So tell me again, how right now is a really great time to be Black? Because you're seeing more commercials from the corporations on TV during the Super Bowl. Is that it? Because, you're seeing LeBron James, out buying teams, or other folks, you're seeing new videos from Jay-Z or something. I don't know why
the
you
weekend.
think it's a good time. The weekend. But I need you to explain to me why you think it's a good time to be Black.
But another response could obviously be, so then if you could be, would you be Black right now? Is it that good? And that response used to stop people in their tracks. And I mean, there's some viral video where someone uses that as an argument and everybody's like, no, you make a good point. I wouldn't want to be Black. But the dangerous situation I think we are in now is that a lot of polling of white folks says that they have it worse. Like that's the belief that a lot of white folks, that they have it, and I think that might be the root of what this person.
I've seen the polls where white people believe that they are the most targeted, discriminated against.
Religious people are.
Religious people think that are ranked right up there. But the question always comes. My uncle used to say this: if you ask a man whether he would lose all of his money or be Black, they'll choose to lose the money because they think they can make the money back again.
There
right?
you go. There you go. Yeah.
But blackness carries some real risk that nobody wants any part of, right?
So I want you to maybe one of the things I wanted to ask you today and is take us into the black conversation right now, because I sometimes I reach out to people in my life and say, hey, how are you doing? Black people in my life, how are you doing? Because I'm really having a hard time seeing all these videos and hearing all this news. I'm really struggling. It's really depressing. And if I'm this affected by it, you must, I don't want to make any assumptions, but it must be harder for you, because at least I don't have to worry about that could be me or my kids. Like, I can't imagine that. And so what is the conversation like? It's not monolithic, obviously, but what is the conversation that you have been having with black people right now to kind of cope with this onslaught, this avalanche of horror that comes, it's seemingly in waves in terms of the news media?
I think that it is the revisiting of trauma, right? And so, and I've said this out loud, that the oldest living man in my family was born in 1986. So, and my nephew will be 35 this summer. He's the oldest man. My son, who's 30, is the second oldest man. No uncles, no grandfather, no father. You go down the list, right? My older brothers have passed on. And so one was murdered, one HIV. But when you look at that, and I see an Eric Garner, I see a Dante, or I see, a George Floyd, I see my neighbors, my cousins, my uncles, I see their faces, right? But there's a meme going around. I don't really listen to memes very much. There's one going around that says author unknown. And it is told from the voice of a black man who is dropping off his kids at school, and he travels through his day. And he's talking about all the things that he avoids: buying candy, tinted windows, no air freshener in the window. He kind of walks through, and in a way, he's telling the story of the high profile deaths that he's witnessed through popular media.
You shared that meme somewhere on Twitter. I'm trying to find it. Yeah.
Dead. And by the time he gets home at night, he really hasn't lived. And by the way, sleeping is a bad idea too, And so I think that probably hit me more than anything else, is that we truly do sort of walk between the traumas. And that when you see somebody like Matt Walsh come back and basically say, who cares about your traumas? The world is better without them.
Ooh, does he hate black people?
Ooh, he must really hate himself. I got to tell you that's always a reflection about how somebody really feels about themselves. Toni Morrison said, how does it feel to have to feel tall if you stand on somebody else's neck? And what are you without your whiteness? What would your pitiful self have in this world if you weren't white? Does it make you smarter? Does it make you richer? All those kinds of things. And so, yeah, if Matt Walsh wants to feel bigger because he's stepping on the back of a dead George Floyd, I got a little sympathy for Matt Walsh.
Interesting. But like, is there a conversation? Is there a support group? Is there anything for you? Like, do people, and how should we see these types of, right now it's kind of a static situation with the Derek Chauvin case. It's an everyday thing, because every day we're seeing, and then every day we're seeing these videos of these police arrests and so on. But like, I just see a lot of black people kind of like giving up on social media. I can't take it kind of thing. And I'm always like, don't blame you. I'm not going to say a thing to you. I'm not going to try to console you. I don't know how you do it. I've said this a lot of times. I don't know how black people don't go around punching white people, killing white people. How do you deal with this constant indignity throughout generations now? And, I have so much respect for the grace, specifically, certainly of you, but I'm thinking about Kristen Clark today and dealing with all these Republican senators yesterday. And in case people don't know, she's the Department of Justice nominee to head the Civil Rights Division, first black woman that would do that job. And I think, like, when you're being constantly assailed and insulted, I don't blame anybody for wanting to give up. I don't blame anybody for wanting to lash out. So how do you deal with it? How do you talk to each other to cope with it? Is there any advice, practice, conversation that happens?
It is really super easy to get overwhelmed. It's super easy to be angry. It is super easy, to want to lash out. Those are the easy things. It is harder to rise to some grace. It is harder to take the fight to court, to street, to reform. It is harder to invest yourself, really in the work. But if you look at the history of Black people in this country and all that has been set upon them, we shouldn't be in existence. And that's because we've had some physical and mental resilience through all of this that, that speaks to, I think, who we are really as a culture, that we've survived these centuries of. And so I think that when people say, I got to pull back today, and I often do it, right? That lights out for gold. I'm going to be off this thing for a couple of days. So I couldn't watch, a lot of the Derek Chauvin trial because it was just too hard to watch people justify that this man stood on this man's neck for 9 minutes, that watching people get on the stand and fix their mouths to say, and so it was hard for me. And you got to say that's okay, because when you can invest in some self-care, get yourself re-geared, and then you're ready for the next fight. Every fight can't be yours. You got to pick them, right? And so I think that's been important really for me. You don't see me write as much as I used to. I used to be on the daily churn, whether it be Daily Beast, MSNBC, CNN, all the places that I've written, that I'd have 2 or 3 pieces out a week. I haven't had a piece out since Kamala Harris was, accepted the nomination. And before that, I hadn't had a piece in many months before that. And before that, it was a full year, right? Because it is just frankly tough, because you got to internalize, digest, and then put it on the page. So I write less. And part of that is my self-care. And so when you see me come out with a new essay, opinion, column, something has hit me so deeply, as I feel like there is no other voice but mine. There are so many great voices out there that right now I'm on the bench and I'm letting those other voices have all the power that they have, right? I love reading Jamil Smith.
Jamil, yeah.
I love, reading Adam Serwer. I love, reading a number of folks. I love reading Jamel Bowie. Their voices are so much stronger and clearer than mine, right? But I allow them, the space and give them my support because I frankly need the break.
Yeah. Well, I see that of a lot of people who I respect who are of a certain age, and I want to always be like, to some extent, I'm not at all comparing myself to you, but I'm 45. And so I kind of, or even someone who's been an activist their whole life, my brother, he's kind of saying what you're saying. Like I paid my dues. I've done my work. I've done it. And I can't, at a certain point, you almost aren't even effective because the scar tissue is there, or you're not as connected because you can't be. But you're, in your case, you have done lifetimes and lifetimes of work, so you could sail off anytime you want, as far as I'm concerned, and you would have, all of the merit, all of the lifetime achievement award. I think Goldie Taylor already has, is what I'm trying to say, for the work that you've done.
I appreciate it. There's more work to be done. I'm just taking a break, but when I come back, you'll see it. Boom.
Oh, I know that you're not going anywhere ever, but my point is, no one would blame you if you did, because you could retire from all of it, I'm saying, and there's a whole bunch of people like that. I just talked to Latasha Brown, and it's like, you've been doing this. I don't know how long she's been doing this work, but how many years do you have to put in before you can take? I saw that she was on vacation, and it really resonated with me. I was like, oh, good.
Oh, good.
Good for you.
Because we have another election fight coming up here in Georgia, and I need her in court, right? So, get your son on, lady friend. Get your son on. So I want her to get some rest, right? And so self-care is truly important, and checking in and out. And knowing that there are others in this fight, right? Well, and that you can trust that they're there too.
The other thing that you made me think of right there is just we're really almost entirely be talking about race, But I remember like hearing a lot of women talk about what you're saying shortly after Trump was elected, and even more specifically and acutely during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. Like, I can't do this. I can't watch this. I can't be this. And, sexual violence is so if you're a black woman, then that's like
the intersectionality of it all. Yeah. But here's the other thing. When we do step out, boy, do we get attacked, right? We get attacked first. And more frequently, the studies will show you when you look at social media that the harassment is really targeted. That when we raise our voices, there is a move to silence us. I experienced it my entire public career. From the first time I hit the airwaves at MSNBC until this present day, death threats, Twitter trolling stuff, hit pieces, all in an attempt to make certain that my voice and others, right, don't get hurt or that we'll just go home. I decided to take a little self-care, but, certainly not going to shut up. You do see me on the Twitter machine, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's really a part of it, too, is there is a different gauntlet for us to have to weather to do this work. We got to recognize what that is and create some guardrails for ourselves. That was one of the things that made the big mistake of not doing when I first sort of emerged, is not creating guardrails for myself. I was into every voice and every attack and internalizing it.
Create guardrails, but I suspect create practices too. And I mean practices that have to be active in the moment. And I want to take you to yesterday. Did you watch any of the testimony of Kristen Clark?
I did.
There was a physical, I noticed this, and I'm just making this up in my own head, but there was this kind of way that she sat that I almost felt like she was telling herself to sail above. Don't come down. It's almost like it just made me think of Michelle Obama, when they go low thing. But it's like, it's not effective if you take a step down, if you play at their game, if you allow yourself to be triggered. I felt like she was trying to be above it all. She knew the game. I also felt like these white men, these male Republicans, were just showing themselves to be exactly what they were, such fucking assholes. And I mean, you can be that way.
Assholes don't think they're assholes. First of all, watching her reminds me why I'm not in public service, why I'm not an elected or appointed official, because I couldn't keep my mouth shut. I have no. I don't have that kind
I know,
of
but you have to recognize that. Yeah.
I would have said, the corner, are you fucking kidding me? So I don't have that. So I took great pleasure in watching her not simply defend herself. That really wasn't what she was doing, right? But laying out for them, the kind of candidate she truly is. And so, and it was interesting to watch them, continue to bury them. She allowed them to bury themselves, right? And so Michelle Obama says, when they go low, we go high. When they go low, you lower the pole and go lower. So, so we're just a very different kind of person, but it was very, very good to watch her. And I think that we talked before about Merrick Garland being, the Attorney General. And I said that the power was in the deputies. This is the one I was talking about.
Yes. Do you give, credit to Merrick Garland for this appointment and other appointments, what he's doing? He seems like a really good white guy to have there.
Yeah, his two chief deputy appointments, I think, are as strong as anything Eric Holder did, right? I think Sally Yates is, the most powerful, AG I think we could have had. She's got some other calling to do right now, and I'm glad for that. But I truly do believe that these deputies and how you staff, that's really what makes the difference. Who you entrust to do the work.
So before I let you go, I have to, you gave me, what's the phrase when someone says something that you relate to perfectly? The whiskey and Diet Coke controversy that you've been tweeting about. So you drink, I too drink whiskey and Diet Coke. My question was different from yours. My question was, I drink partially I drink it sometimes at night because there's caffeine in a Diet Coke and I want that. And my question was, how much caffeine is there in soda? Is it really like a cup of coffee? Yours, however, was about sugar, and there's a major debunking that occurred, but take me through this controversy here at the end. Whiskey.
I have a very logical friend, right? And this logical friend says, Goldie, you're doing these new, meal, because, I love making comfort food and I love eating it. Food is like a second religion to me, right? Mm-hmm. And in the midst of the coronavirus and not leaving the house, I had the COVID-10 is what I'll call it. And, I'm a 52-year-old chick. Losing 10 pounds is not a real easy thing to do. So I said, look, I'm going to change my eating style. I am going to, eat in moderation, eat healthier things, more green things. I'm doing all of this, right? I am not giving up the liquor, so I'm going to drink my calories. So if 100 calories on a glass of wine, I will take that over a piece of cake. Don't care, right? So last night I said, I've had a hard day. I'm going to get some whiskey and some Diet Coke. And my friend says, why are you using Diet Coke and whiskey? And tell me the rationale. And he said, when it's full of sugar. That was his phrase. And I was like, first of all, you don't drink. You wouldn't ask me that piece of blasphemy if you asked me.
I didn't know this detail.
Secondly, you're thin as a light pole. And if you were a 52-year-old perimenopausal woman, you wouldn't ask me about this Diet Coke either. Right. So, in fact, you would be too afraid to get hurt to ask me this question. And I just thought to myself, I'm having to explain my lunacy. And maybe we should just break up now because there's more lunacy than that, right? If you think that Diet Coke and whiskey, is crazy, you ain't met me yet. So I was thinking, maybe I should let the poor fella off the hook. But of course, there's no sugar, no real sugar in whiskey, and it's the skinny chicks drink, really.
Yeah, that's what It's a good drink. It's a good drink to have if you don't want to gain weight, if you don't want calories. But wait a second. So this is the final question is, I feel like I don't know much about drinking other than I enjoy it. It's like music. I don't know much about music other than I enjoy it. These are cultural blind spots of mine. But I do think I have heard that we are not, if we do drink, whiskey and Coke, like you and I do, or in this case, Diet Coke, that it shouldn't be good whiskey. You shouldn't water, right?
No, not good whiskey. No.
Okay.
There's a limit to what, some things just simply should not be diluted, right?
That's what I thought.
Great whiskey is one of them. So I'll put, some whiskey diet like Jack, or even Bullet. But let me go buy a bottle of Uncle Nearest. I'm not putting any Coca-Cola in Uncle Nearest. That stuff is as smooth as the sunshine, right? And so you don't want to dilute everything down. No, I think you're right about that. But I come from a brown liquor family. My mother drank and cussed like a cowboy. And so that comes sort of naturally, really for me. It's an
I don't come from, there was not a lot of liquor. I was lucky in that way. My dad quit drinking when my brother quit drinking, and he only drank beer, and I never saw him drink much, but there was no liquor in our house. And so the point is I'm late to it all. And so I haven't really understood it. So thank you for the lesson there. I don't even know what Bullet is, but it's not good. It's bad whiskey. I had,
no, it's good. It's good whiskey, but that's the last thing. That's the last place on the scale when you want to,
Well, after I lost my job and I was like, my self-esteem was so low. It was like I wasn't even eating because I didn't think I deserved it. Like that's how bad it was. So I couldn't buy myself even a good bottle of liquor. And I bought this, now I can't think of it. The name of it. It's like a guy's name of whiskey. It was so bad that I couldn't even drink it. I still have it somewhere.
There's plenty of swill out there, I must tell you.
But Jack Daniels is what I drink with Diet Coke. Is that right?
Jack and Diet that's my airplane drink. Oh. Jack and Diet.
Thank you for the lesson. Evan Williams.
Oh yeah,
he's bad for you. I feel that's the name of the whiskey.
He's bad for your spirit.
I mean, he sounds exactly. Evan Williams is just literally they ripped off the name Johnny Walker. They're like, let's have a name similar sounding. I would imagine.
But white.
But yes, Johnny Walker. Yes, fair enough. Good point. I was thinking of him as a white guy, but that is a more likely a black name. Yes. All right. Oh man, I love the way you talk, the way you sound, the points you make, and I'm so happy to talk to you today. I'm so glad you were available. Thank you, Goldie. Really appreciate it.
Always good to be with you, Pete. Thanks, my friend.
And there she goes. Please let her know you heard her here on the podcast. That always matters a lot. At Goldie Taylor on Twitter if you're on the Twitter. and I really appreciate that. That was awesome. I love talking to her. I got to get her on more, I think. I say, who else would you like to hear? What would you like me to talk about? standupwithpete@gmail.com. Thank you for all of you who joined me last night at the Zoom Hangout. It's always fun. Thursdays at 8, you can join me. Thank you to all the new subscribers. It's been weeks since I gave shout-outs. I got to do that, and I will next week, I promise you. Have a great weekend. Hang out with us on the Discord platform if you are a member. That way you're never alone. There's always a chat going on the Discord platform with Stand Up with Pete Dominic community members, subscribers. So check that out. Have a great weekend, and I will talk to you Monday. Thank you so much for listening. Take it away, John Carroll.
They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it than now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up. Stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up. People got the power. Stand up. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on.